At no point do I get the impression that you walk out your salvation without ever moving, without ever learning, without ever doing, without ever anything. All you got to do is just get saved and then go sit on your lazy boy chair at home and just wait to die. And see, that's the other part. So many people have that mentality and that point of view. Like I said, the whole thing gets confusing because of just at least where I'm at in my spiritual walk or whatever. There's all these things crashing together, all these conflicting bits of information. It's like, it's got to make sense. It's got to make sense somehow. How do you put it all together and how do you do it, but keep it within the confines and the framework of the biblical narrative and make sure that you're just not making up stuff because that's the occult.
I'm Todd, and I was naughty. I did everything wrong. I got kicked out of art school, I drank heavily, and I looked to other religions and versions of spirituality to get fulfilled. The problem was, I was in the occult and I didn't even know it. My life was a wreck, and I had to learn what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus.
And I'm Laura. I was super nice. I did everything right. I got saved young, went to Moody Bible Institute, got married, and followed the Christian rules to having a good life. Problem was, that formula didn't work. I had to change how I related with Jesus.
At the end of the day, what I learned is the very simple truth.
Jesus is the answer, the only answer,
And the only one that will ever actually fulfill you.
naughty
versus
nice.
And welcome back to Naughty versus Nice. I'm Todd.
And I'm Laura.
And I'm his favorite wife, Kelly.
Yes, you are indeed.
Although, like 5 minutes ago, I wasn't sure the marriage was going to last.
It's all the stuff that people don't hear before we hit the record button, you know?
It's, dude, if I get divorced over anything, it will be IT issues.
Oh, dude, I'm just saying sometimes, that couch is, got your name on it tonight, babe.
Kelly was very stern. Very stern.
So normally we have a quick conversation. We kind of get on the same page. We go over our show notes, like what are we going to talk about and kind of what direction or angle are we going to take regarding the topic that we're going to talk about. And then it just kind of happens. We talk about our notes. We kind of have a lot of just, free exchange. So we try to kind of stick with a general conversation style format for kind of how we approach the show.
And it's really not any different than any other social setting where we're all together. And then, like, we do a Bible study, and so Todd has a point, and then I'm like, to that point, I say this, and then you say something, and then pretty soon they're either, like, looking at their phone, or they have tennis ball eyes.
Kind of going back and forth,
That's true.
right?
That's my life. And every 40 minutes, I say one random thing. Like, you know what I was thinking? All right, so...
So then Kelly, like, sends a text. We got this group text thing where we talk about the show and different things. And she's like, nobody talk about any of their notes or any of their things. Don't say nothing about nothing.
That was actually my idea, so I'm sorry.
Oh, was it really? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but I'll take the heat.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I didn't want to see you fall. I was going to go down with you.
So, Kelly, jump in and just kind of tell everybody what we're doing.
Okay, so we had let everybody knew we'd been looking for a new church for the last year and stuff. Well, God informed us where we were going to be. It was a much more surprising. And we weren't expecting this church, but we're like, okay, let's jump in feet first. Let's do that. We decide on the church, and like 2 days later, it's like, hey, we're doing a thing where they're answering questions that people could, like send in and stuff. So we go, and of course, it was something you're supposed to sign up for and prepay and do all this stuff. We didn't do any of that. We just showed up, thinking we would get a good idea of where the church was theologically. We'd sit, we'd listen.
I think you did.
Well, we did. Yes, we did. But somebody had asked a question about once saved, always saved. And all three pastors that were on the stage said that you can lose your salvation. And it totally took me by surprise when they said that. And it opened up this whole can of worms of discussion between the three of us. And then the three of us kind of all went individually into a dive biblically and started looking at different passages and commentary and referenced the ones that they gave as reasons why you can lose your salvation and whatnot. So as somebody who had always believed once saved, always saved, all of a sudden I was like, I don't know if that's actually my position anymore. And so as we started researching stuff, so that's why Laura was like, you know what, let's not talk about it. Let's just discuss out all of our findings while recording tonight in the studio and see where it goes and where everybody lands. So that's what we're doing. So take it away, smart people.
Well, and I'm not attending the same church, so that is a different dynamic, too, that kind of is laying the table out. So I didn't go to this, so I wasn't there. So when I hear this issue, this one is one that is a line in the sand for me. So if I discover that that's the doctrine of a church, it's not like I, throw a bomb in the room or something. I just decide that's not where I'm going to go, because I believe church is about growing together in fellowship, and that is in truth. And I don't agree on any level that's true. And so that's a line in the sand. If I find out that church teaches that, I'm not like, I'll visit or whatever, but I'm not going to join myself to it. That's how strongly I feel. There are things I'm willing to be like, but that one's not one.
Can you go ahead and just from your point of view kind of explain what the once saved, always saved concept is? And if you have history to talk about it or any kind of additional filler details or something, just kind of lay that down for everybody so they got a rough idea. Maybe it's the first time somebody's heard about this concept, so we can kind of talk about it. As we talk about it, it'll kind of flesh out a little bit better.
So I think I would say there's 3 camps. There's kind of a third one just by default. The first camp is going to say you are saved. And so that phrase, once saved, always saved. So believing that you have trusted Christ, you've received the Spirit, that's not something that can ever be taken away or lost. It's secure. And so you would believe a life could show things that might look off and on throughout it. But you would say that person is saved because they were saved initially. And then the second camp is you get saved. So with the first one, there's a little bit less of the free will concept in choosing Christ. It's a little bit more the Spirit brings you to the point where you cooperate and believe. In the second one, where you believe you can lose it, it's going to be a heavier focus on the free will. Like, I choose him, and so then therefore it's easier to believe that my actions can basically withdraw me again. It wouldn't be an offense against his work because I'm the one moving back and forth. That's my experience with it. That might not be everyone's. But in that view, you can lose your salvation. I don't know if that looks like for everybody who believes that the Spirit departs and then comes back, or what they're thinking, but it's usually going to be based on behavior. And so by what we can see in a person's life, then either we or they decide at some point that it's bad enough behavior that you've lost your salvation, and now you better get back on the hamster wheel and gain it back, get back ground. So the third one is kind of it fits a little bit with the first one. It's how we would answer that. So as a person who believes you have eternal security in your salvation, how would I answer somebody who has a season of faith and they profess, but then the rest of their life they say, nope, I don't want anything to do with that. I hate that. That wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I signed up for, whatever. I would say that person hadn't experienced salvation in the beginning. So that's the kind of the way the once saved, always saved person approaches the kind of diverse experience we see with other believers or other people we think are believers. I think that's our answer to that. I don't know if I think that was the 3. I thought there was another thing I thought, but
my position, or like my approach to all of this, once again, I was involved in the occult and I didn't know it. And inside of the occult, there's counterfeit variations of things that I came at it through the other side. So all of a sudden, I'm learning all these things regarding Christianity. I'm like, wow, that's amazing, because the occult has a version of it. It's just different. It's inverted or something to that effect. And initially, my whole position was, if the occult says this, I want to get as far away from that as possible. So I'll be happy to jump into whatever concept or idea. I didn't even understand there was a thing called theology at the time, just to get away from it. And if you can remember, like when I was talking about doing the presentation, one of the things that I would say to the effect of the idea that we're just robots or something, and trying to get as far, it goes back and forth. The problem is that when you really sit down and think it through, there's 2 different versions of how they actually do it. But my point is this. At the time, they had a concept, okay? And the concept is basically this. Within the occult, it has its own very specific idea of they would call it just the will, and not necessarily free will the way like most people would probably express the idea. They call it the will, which it's a little bit more targeted. It's a little bit more specific. So it's an essential part of the centralized structure of the nature of what a cult belief is. So the will is seen as being sort of like a divine expression of the true nature of man that's not yet manifest or realized, because the spirit is first. So the will is connected to the spirit, kind of, and the physical is mundane. It still hasn't caught up to the perfection of the spirit. So the will is sort of like the truest essence of the godly nature of the perfected man. It would be a way to think of it. So when we think about the idea of like Aleister Crowley and his famous maxim, do as thou wilt, that is the whole of the law. Okay, well, who else has a law? That's God. How many does God have? He has 10, the 10 commandments. How much did Crowley have? He just had the one. And so you get this inversion concept of what's going on. What is the inversion of the number 10? It's 0, 1, which is 1. So Crowley gives just one law. What's the one law? Do whatever you want. There is no rules, that kind of thing. And within that, you have this, their will is not responsive to God or to the Creator. It is the Creator. So they don't align with God's truth. They make their own truth. They don't submit to God's plan. They manifest their own destiny. That's what the manifestation phenomenon is. There are many different variations of that. So it all traces back to basically the concept of Hermeticism, the concept of magic, taking the sacred 7 sciences and the 7 principal truths. One of them, the 7 sacred sciences is the masculine. The principal truths is the feminine, and then you're the will, which brings them together, and the will is the son, because the son is the man before he becomes God. So it's this version of this unholy trinity, and when you combine all of them together, you create reality. You make up your own version of reality, and then you force others to live in it. That is what magic is. I know it sounds dumb, but that's what it is. And it works, too, because think of just the nature of the lie. Just the simplest lie. Did you eat that cookie from the cookie jar? Is their mouth is full of cookie or whatever. It's the root of that idea of the lie. It's an attempt by the will of the user to artificially create a new reality that the victim will accept as true, then live inside of that manufactured artificial reality and operate within it. So the 5-year-old doesn't get in trouble because they didn't take the cookie. See kind of what I'm saying with that? So coming from that approach of what the nature of the will is, it is the thing that bends reality. It's like, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And then you got this idea of, the elect, this Calvinistic concept of predetermination, for lack of a better way to put it. And I'm like, that's about as far away as you can get. Okay, I'm in, and so I've been operating. It didn't make sense to me. I couldn't make sense of it, but I'd catch up eventually. That was kind of my thinking.
Well, and I don't know if this will bring even more confusion to the table, but this weekend, my son, who doesn't listen to the podcast because he's too busy, he was discussing his view after getting a theology minor, that what his view of free will versus predetermination, or whatever you want to call it. And I think we said in one of the first episodes, I would take the word will out of it if I could, because it misrepresents it. But either way, he said, I've landed on it being 65-35. And I thought in my head, oh, that's great. You don't realize yet it's 100%. It's 100% because you have full responsibility. You have full faculty of your members. And he has full power over the outcome of absolutely everything. And people are like, well, does he know which dress I'll pick? Yeah. I mean, why does that threaten everybody? I don't get why that's a big deal. So I think to me, this isn't a hard one, but I don't know why it's not. When it's hard things, when difficult things happen, yes, that's harder. But I would rather know that he is not powerless in those events than to think he is just kind of, oh, wait, how are things?
Letting you flounder your way through them.
Yeah. And I don't mean by that either. You can go the other side way too harsh where you're like, well, this suffering you're in is this incredibly wanted thing by God. That's what people imply with God's will. It's that he takes pleasure in that I'm suffering. That isn't what that is. But again, it is a muddy pool. Did I make it muddier? Because that was kind of my point.
No, that's and that's one of the things is that as this whole event unfolded and we were listening to what this person was saying, I don't have an entire position on everything right now. So, people get an opportunity. It's like, oh, you sound like you know what you're talking about. There's a lot I'm hard line on. I'm on one side of the line or the other. I've thought it through. I've done the research. In learning, but there's also a process where you're like still learning. And so I don't know how many other people do different shows and are like, okay, on this one, I don't entirely know yet. I haven't completed all the research or the studying or thinking it all the way through. There's bound to be some part of it that I'm never going to be able to fully understand. But I have to get to the point where it's like, okay, do my choices matter? Because they appear to. Mm-hmm. They seem to operate like they do. And God's not the author of confusion, and God's not the liar. So if he's created a reality where it presents itself to me as though my decisions matter and the outcome that happens are a direct result of my interaction with him, and I'm to be held responsible for him, then at a certain point, I've got to take that at face value because it seems to be that way. And then so you got the idea of this. Well, here's the thing. Like when I was originally like, okay, fine, the idea of the elect, it's all predetermined, it's all pre-written. I'm not saying that it's not, but it's like you're more like a robot in that scenario, right? And so then you go down to the idea of like, I think they doing the research for this, they called it like double predestination. Okay, so apparently this is a really big problem, and I kind of get it, but I kind of don't. So the way that I had always thought of it was, well, God has his elect written since the foundation of the world, and the names are all written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Okay, I get that idea. Like, it's all chosen. It's all done. Everything was done before. He's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, right? So that means all the names of all the people that are ever going to be saved, they're already written down, which means that's the elect, which means they're not born yet. They're gonna respond positively to the gospel or whatever, and then the idea is like, well, there's nothing they can do to stop it from happening. Okay, it's getting a little weird, but okay. But then not only that, here's the double part, okay? Then that also means that if they don't choose God, then they're not saved, which means then he's also condemning them by his choice too, or something like that. So now you got a situation where it's almost like God's the author of evil. You know what I'm saying? Like, God does the judging, like I get that, but then it's like God forces you don't have any input and whether or not you're going to be found guilty, and then he takes pleasure in judging you as guilty. It's like, well, hold on. You mean the whole thing's rigged? Because that can't be right either, And
I know you haven't really attached the idea of works to it yet, but
that's coming up.
There, even in discussing it, like you're saying it does. It sounds robotic, and I think this is something I'm seeing more and more. I think the root of a lot of the difficulties on theological issues comes back to misunderstanding what happened in the garden. Because if the garden was about right and wrong, and just whatever rule it was, don't brush your teeth before bed, and he did it. It was like, it's a rule and you broke it, and now I'm mad and we're separated. And that bleeds into everything, because to understand the depth of the relationship that existed, to see that Adam's life source, his power source, his everything was God, everything. And the sin of the moment is to say, I want you, but only on my terms. And so I made my God my will. And that is the major offense. That's why the occult always goes back to the will, because that is over and over, it's what we do. So it's a relational fracture. So now you're dealing with this idea of election and, double predestination, all this kind of weird stuff. It's so, I feel like it becomes like, did you decide, did you not decide? Were you programmed to not? And it loses the idea of the magnitude of what it is to be relationally drawn into him. So when I say somebody is elect, one, we've all been learning recently, I think that's a little bit more function, and that's less, you're my prized pony. It's more, you, like the disciples, you were brought into a position where you have a function and a role within this massive picture, and it's a privilege. End of story. But election is, to me, when a person gets saved, I believe that the Spirit works on you before, whether that's 10 seconds or 5 years, whatever it is. I believe there is a wooing from the Spirit, and he opens my ears and I hear the gospel and I believe. I'm cooperating with it, but he drew me there. I'm not uncomfortable with that. People are kind of like, well, that's uncomfortable. But I don't then think, I don't get this whole double thing. I think people are spending all this time thinking about are we, aren't we, and then making it an elite status. You don't understand the world you were in before if you think you're special and more special than someone else to be brought in the world you exist in now in his presence. It makes it all icky and weird. Am I making it even muddier? I don't know.
No, you're not, because it sounds like what you're saying is the idea is people seem to be, at least historically, be treating the concept of the elect or the word as like a noun when it's more like a verb. It's more like a modifier to how to be versus a status or something like that. Because I keep going back to this whole thing. It's like the instant you're elect and you're chosen and somebody else isn't, you can treat them however you want to. And since all of your sin, technically speaking, is covered by the blood of the Lamb, and since you can't do anything to lose your salvation, so to speak, okay, whatever the actual theology, I'm just trying to make the argument here, then why not treat somebody poorly because of the color of their skin? They're not elect after all. All you got to do is make it up in your head is what I'm saying. Now you've got a godly justification for racism, classism, whatever ism or whatever instaphobe concept you want to come up with. And then you're going to tell me that all the people with the blue hair are wrong for saying what they're saying. It sounds to me like you believe literally what they do, just slightly differently. So either it's wrong when anybody does it, no matter the justification, or it's actually right, and you just have to be in agreement to how to justify it. You see kind of what I'm saying? I can't come up with an idea that's like somebody of a certain race is better than somebody else of not like. Or something to that effect. Like, and that's not like, if God came down and said that, I guess, you know what I mean? I'd be like, well, I don't understand. I don't necessarily agree. But I mean, it's God, he kind of does whatever he wants to do. But I can't get, God will save a homeless guy and a rich guy. I can't, he doesn't seem to have lines based on that.
If anything, he usually, historically, in building the picture of the gospel in the Old Testament, he's picking the loser over the winner.
Well, yeah,
And I think we had kind of learned that idea of, I think it was just a simple statement, election is more about function than anything. I think election equals, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget why you were talking. Election equals responsiveness, because when he's talking to the disciples and he's saying, I'm going away, I'm going to prepare a place for you. That means I'm going to make it possible for you to be connected to me as I'm connected to the Father. And then we will give you the Spirit. You will have a place within us that you could not have procured. You can't secure it. You can't earn it. You can't lose it. I did that. That's how efficient the work of the cross is I've created that abode, and you cannot lose that. But in response to that, you have a responsibility. But it's not responsibility the way we understand it, like, well, now I have to do this in order to be okay. No, it's you will experience what it is to be connected with me. It will transform you, and you will carry out the function of being a part of the body, a part of the building up of this kingdom that I have brought through my work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Todd, for that word.
Indeed.
Wow, you got like double.
I know.
I'm
getting punched from both sides right now.
Yes, I agree with everything you just said. What took me by surprise and down this little rabbit hole for me was I had been surrounded by people who believed once saved, always saved for so long that to hear the opposite, I was like, what? And it totally threw me off. I had to apologize to the speakers after. So I got a little rowdy. I understand that. But I did go home and I read through all of the examples and all of the verses and passages that they gave as reasons why you could lose your salvation. 2 of them were in Hebrews 6, 4-6, and Hebrews 10:26, talk about drifting away. But when you read the whole passage, I found it very interesting that it's telling you, like, you can't stay on the baby milk. You can't stay on this basic foundational information. You have to grow in your knowledge and understanding because it will strengthen you and anchor you in the truth so you won't drift, which made me start thinking about, and this is where we get the occult themes in church. We start to drift. They come in because we're not anchored. But what I really came down to, so I was like, oh my goodness, can you lose your salvation? Like, what is this? Have I been completely misunderstood on this whole time? So I got thinking about it and looking in Strong's and stuff. What was interesting to me about all of the passages is they all come back to knowledge, to head knowledge. You had the knowledge of Christ. You had the enlightenment of Christ. You had but it was never understanding. It was always a head knowledge. You had a base understanding of who he was, and then you chose another path. It never went into you had a heart understanding. You were completely sealed, and then you just wandered away. And I was like, okay, well, if you're sealed, you're completely, the word was like whole, complete, one. Like, okay, great. I can get behind that. If we're sealed in Christ, and then through Christ, the Spirit is working in us to grow us in our sanctification process, why would we ever want to walk away when everything is pushing us in that relationship? I think in one episode we had talked about everything in our life is to grow us in relationship with Jesus. So why would the Spirit all of a sudden stop that if we were sealed with him in his heart or in our heart? So that's what I came back to. So my final answer is, if you are sealed in truly sealed in the Spirit, yes, he will. You cannot walk away from that. But are you chained? No. This is a choice. It is relational, and it is a covenant. And a covenant takes two people in the choice to make it work, like any healthy relationship.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have a rebuttal.
Yeah, go.
Not a rebuttal. No, there's just a response. And the idea of the sealing of the Spirit, you're going to see that in Ephesians 1, that the word seal is going to mean like an earnest payment, a down payment, and there's this idea of an unbreakable like wax seal that you've sealed on something. So it's very permanent in nature, and it's very promissory. So when somebody starts talking about you can lose your salvation, I want to think for a minute about the huge statement it is throughout all of the New Testament of the Spirit dwelling within the believer. It is the determining factor if you're saved or not. And if you are, as Paul says, sealed in that, and that down payment, he's saying, he's looking at Christ's own two-part resurrection. Christ was raised as a physical, spiritual being. We are raised, and in conversion, we have a kind of a resurrection of the inner man. But the outer is waiting. The promise, the down payment, is the Spirit living in us, reforming and waking up and making this inner man, basically. It's his promise to us that he's going to raise us on the last day physically. It's a huge, huge, huge statement about salvation. So if you are telling me that somebody can lose their salvation, you also biblically have to be under that umbrella of saying the Spirit is unsealing, sealing, unsealing, sealing. You're losing their down payment. It's coming back forth, back forth. You're putting his commitment to what he's done on the line. You're putting the character of God on the line. Does that make sense? It's bigger than big. It's a huge offense to me when I hear it, and I'm just being very candid. I don't think you understand what the Spirit means in the whole picture. Not you guys, the world. The world I'm ranting at.
If that's the case, let's say you really did believe that, though. Like, you could lose your salvation, and people will point to a verse. I can't remember where it's at. It's in one of my umpteen pages of notes. Something to the effect of, it's your life is worse off if you walk away. If you lose your salvation.
2 Peter. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Something like that. Well, then why are people raising their kids in the church? Like, why wouldn't you wait until they're fully grown, fully developed, fully emotional, ready to handle it, and then introduce them to the gospel so that way they can make a thought-provoking, informed decision, not a decision based like a 5-year-old. You know what I'm saying? And then you're like, yes, I love Jesus. Well, yeah, every 5-year-old kid kind of does, and then all of a sudden they're 13 and they're kind of being jerks, or they're 15 and they're like, what do you know, old man? You don't know anything. And then they're, trying to smoke cigarettes and back by the shed or doing whatever I was doing back then. And then they walk away from it. Okay, what uppity teenager isn't going to rebel against what their parents taught them? And now they've lost their salvation, and it's actually the parents' fault in a weird sort of way. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that doesn't make any sense to me either. Like, it's not like God doesn't know teenagers are kind of jerks, So it's like,
I can.
How do you resolve all this? And that's the point that I'm getting at. Okay, the other thing I want to make, what was the term you used? Responsible something?
responsible responsiveness, is that too
That's funny
repetitive?
because the word I actually came up with to try to describe it is, I don't think free will is a good word to use to talk about when we're talking about the subject. The responsibility of agency. That's what I came up with. That makes more sense to me. You're still responsible for following through with what it is that you're going to do. At no point do I get the impression that you walk out your salvation without ever moving, without ever learning, without ever doing, without ever anything. All you got to do is just get saved and then go sit on your lazy boy chair at home and just wait to die. And see, that's the other part. So many people have that mentality and that point of view. Like I said, the whole thing gets confusing because of just at least where I'm at in my spiritual walk or whatever. There's all these things crashing together, all these conflicting bits of information. It's like, it's got to make sense. It's got to make sense somehow. How do you put it all together and how do you do it, but keep it within the confines and the framework of the biblical narrative and make sure that you're just not making up stuff, because that's the occult.
And I feel a great deal of the pressure of the whole question, like you said, something along the lines of being responsible enough. Again, we do not understand what has happened in a person who's been converted. So you are no longer just Todd doing a few things differently. You are different, Todd. And so now you're something other. You are a new creation. And part of being a new creation is you are spirit indwelt. And by that, you will be transformed by just being in open submission to that new relationship. Transformation will come. But everybody in this argument wants to make this be almost work, legal, work. And it's always because I believe not you, but people in this debate, you're still looking at the garden as right and wrong and do and don't. And it's not that. It's relational. So if I'm a new creation, I've been brought alive, I've been hidden in Christ, placed with Christ, seen as Christ, co-heirs with Christ, the Spirit is dwelling and active and alive within me, the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead. He is doing a work, and it is relational. It isn't like this thing I have to always just pull my bootstraps up to do. That's what I kind of have never gotten. It's this view that you haven't been given the best thing for you in the whole world is to be connected to him, and everybody's trying to determine how much work we have to do in order to look like we got it right. I don't know. That makes me mad.
But see, that's one of the areas that I get tripped up on too, though, right? So I get what you're saying, and it's not you're putting the cart before the horse, but the horse needs to go before the cart. So it's something along the idea of, that one popular verse that Catholics will use to be like, no, it's works and salvation. Mm-hmm. See, you gotta, it's faith and works in something. I don't have the verse in front of me, but
somewhere in James.
James gets used to justify this type of idea that you have to get baptized, you have to do the Eucharist, you have to. And it's kind of like, okay, no, but, okay, now just hear me out on this. See, I have a problem with flat out saying, no, that's not the case. Not the Catholic stuff, but this. All right, so you got this show called The Chosen, right? Okay, and it's popular, and it's on season 3 or whatever, and all, regardless of whatever you think about it, all right? The show depicts, quote-unquote, the life of Jesus. There's a number of fictional elements that are put in there in order to make one cohesive narrative, and the show thrilling and entertaining for audiences. And regardless of your position on whether or not it's good or bad, I'm just going to mention this real quick, all right? So you got Exodus 20, and then verse 4. You shall not make yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the water under the earth. All right, so my first question is this. Where's Jesus right now? Is he in heaven? Oh, he is. He is. Okay, but we're not supposed to make an idol of anything that's going on in heaven, right? So Jesus is in heaven. The show is about Jesus. Right there, we got a problem. And then people are like, no, there's no problem. Look, Jesus fulfilled the law, okay? You're not still under the law, and you're covered by the blood of the Lamb. You're made a new creation. A new covenant entirely has been done, okay? So you don't have to worry about anything that's going on with the 10 Commandments. We're not penalized for any of that stuff. Okay, fair enough. Now explain to me why I can't go cheat on my wife. And it's I'm not under the law, and there's no penalty for it. So adultery's really not a problem anymore, right? Find me a church that will actually agree with that statement. Hey, pastor, why are we removing all these pastors from their positions when they're having affairs on their wives? They're not under the law. Okay, let's even one step it up even more. Are you voting a certain way because of the Roe versus Wade issue? Are you? Are you sure that we're not under the law. It's not actually an issue. I don't understand why this is such a problem. You can't justify any of the Christian morals on which a lot of civilization, Western culture and civilization is founded and based on. You can't justify not owning slaves. You can't justify Ted Bundy. You can't say Ted Bundy was wrong for the stuff that he did. You know what I'm saying? It's absurd. It's ridiculous, and everybody knows it. But if we're not under the law and the 10 Commandments don't matter, then all of them don't matter. Not just the one you find inconvenient because you really like a TV show. And then if they all do matter because they're all actually moral laws and moral issues, then all of them matter. So you don't get to pick and choose. It's not the 8 commandments, not the 6 commandments. It's the 10. Either all 10 still matter or all 10 don't. And if they all matter, then isn't there an obligation to follow them? Or is there not? What is my responsibility to that? Because you can't get away from the fact that Jesus is saying over and over and over, if you love me, you'll follow my commands. If you love me, you'll follow my... What's he talking about? Is he saying make sure to eat breakfast like 3 squares a day? I don't remember reading that in Scripture. What are Christ's commands? Because I feel like that's pretty specific, you know? So I just keep hitting up against these roadblocks all the time.
Okay. I was like, I have an answer. I don't know if it's the answer. I think I texted you when you said that kind of a similar statement that I'd always read that passage, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And I'd think, man, how do you get away from that? That seems like legalism. And recently someone had said it's when he's speaking there, he's not speaking of the Mosaic law. He's speaking of the commandments he'd given in regards to the new kingdom he was bringing. What is the theory of the new kingdom? The greatest shall serve the lesser. And that is the heart. It's love. That is the evidence of you love your neighbor as yourself, and you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That is the summary of the law, and Christ is the summary of the law. So for him to come in and say, you must do those things I command you, he is talking about how he, in the right relationship with God, has fulfilled the right relationship of the law with God, and now he's here bringing a new gospel, a new kingdom by the presence of the Spirit, and that Spirit is going to be working in us to follow the new commandment, which the one thing he laid out to those 12 men, you want to go change the world, you want to tell them the message, you want to be sent like I was sent, you love one another. That's it. He didn't tell them how to go out and tell everybody other than to say love one another. That is the new command. So I would think that's how we come under the quote law, is we come under the new kingdom criteria. That's not the right word. New kingdom law. I don't know. I'm struggling here. I'm struggling.
No, but exactly. Okay, so
does that make any sense to what you're saying?
It does. But one of the issues you're still going to run up against, then, does that mean I can rob a bank?
No.
Are you sure?
Because when I look at that issue, if I'm in relationship with the Lord, I wouldn't be able to go rob a bank because I'm in a relationship with the Lord. It's the same as if you're married, it's not that you don't just not cheat on Kelly because it's wrong. It's because you love her.
Yes.
I think that's the transformative work. And as your marriage grows over time and over events and over hardships, you love her more and your commitment becomes stronger and stronger. And that doesn't even become an issue anymore.
But there's still things I won't do or will do because I love her. They might not be necessarily enumerated, but they're kind of universal. You know what I'm saying?
No, could you elaborate?
In every single culture, generally speaking, if you love and honor your wife, you're just not going to cheat on her. It doesn't have to be written down, but you're going to find that it's true in Japan, the way it's true in Guatemala, the way it's true in our friends to the Great White North, Canada, America's hat. So it kind of doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be written down, but it's just kind of understood. It's kind of implied in the nature of what we're talking about. Love yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. That Christ boils down the essentials that way. That's correct. And it covers a lot of things, don't get me wrong. But at a certain point, there's I don't know. I'm not saying I need a bunch of rules or I need a bunch of stuff. I just there is, by the nature of being a new creation in Christ, it's not passive. It's active. It's moving, whatever that is. And there's something. It's not about keeping a list of rules in order to make Jesus happy with you and so that he doesn't cry. But it's, like I said, because you love him, you keep the rules. Because you love him, because I love Kelly, I don't go visiting prostitutes. Because I love Kelly, I don't go and engage. I don't go, doing destructive things. They're going to tear apart our marriage and our family and our relationship and all the things that we, so built together. So there's another component.
Can we use a relational example? Like prostitutes is everybody's like, duh.
The go-to, right?
Well,
Right,
sorry, go ahead, Terry.
I was just, because you love me, we have hard conversations together. Because you love me, sometimes you take a stand and have to be like, no, we're not going that direction because we all know I'll jump off a cliff feet first in my excitement for something. Because you love me, you are willing to be in the trenches with me at all times, even if you'd rather be any other place, because that is what is best. Not going out and doing a hooker is pretty easy. Like,
Well, and I was going to say the universality. I think what you're saying is, and everybody basically morally knows that they shouldn't do that, right? That's kind of that doesn't seem specific because it's just so generally understood. But to really not adulterate your marriage is you may go through a layer where it's not going with the hooker, but then it's a layer where you don't just go, take out your bad day on her, and it goes further and further and further and further down. But the thing is Christ was, in a sense, in his earthly life, walking on a life with a real jerk of a wife. Absolutely horrible. She had no interest, no love, no anything for her groom. And he labors, and it's not just the labor of the cross, it's the labor of the every single day. So now you imagine a man who's married to a woman and say she's a woman who is unpleasant to be with. She doesn't seem to help around the house. She isn't a willing partner in your sex life. Whatever it is, you've got a difficult wife. And now it's still a relational issue. You're still going to, if you know the Lord, you're layer by layer going to still love that wife. And does that make sense? It can't just be this way. It's being driven by something other. Because the rest of the world, Japan and everybody else, is going to just not cheat on their wife. And maybe they're even nice to them. And they go through all these nice little steps. But what do they do with the wife who doesn't love them well? They walk away. But what does the believer who is indwelt by the Spirit, what is he called to do in ministry to a wife that isn't fun to minister to? Does that change it at all?
All right, this has been a longer discussion, so I'm going to go ahead and take a break here, and we will follow up in just a few days with the second part. Thank you for listening. Of course, reach out if you have any questions or comments. We look forward to hearing from you. Follow us on all your favorite podcast apps, and we will see you in a few days.